Hello everyone, this is Mr. Harper with our first of a series of online lessons on the skeletal system. And today I want to talk to you a few minutes about the introduction to the skeletal system. Three things we're going to cover. We're going to cover the major parts of the skeletal system in brief. We're going to cover the major functions of the skeletal system and how to classify the bones of the skeletal system. So let's get started. As you can see on the screen already, some of the major parts, of course, bones. Your skeletal system is made of bones and joints. There are different classifications of joints. We'll talk about those later on in the lessons. And joints are simply where two or more bones come together. Sometimes they meet and move, and sometimes they meet and don't move. We'll talk about what those mean. We'll talk about cartilage later on. Cartilage is a cushioning, a slick substance between bones that help bones that move together to move without pain. We'll talk more about that. And tendons and ligaments later on in the lessons. Tendons connect bones to muscle, and tendons also connect muscles to muscles within the muscular system, not part of the skeletal system there. And ligaments that connect bones to bones. Perhaps you've heard of a ligament like the ACL, the anterior cruciate ligament that's part of your knee that frequently is in sports injuries, get ripped. So those are the major parts. Second, let's talk about the functions of the skeletal system. Skeletal system has several major functions. Number one, the obvious thing, it supports your body. Without your skeletal system, you would simply be a blob on the floor. It helps you to stand. It helps you to move. It gives you support. It gives you structure. Second major thing, it protects internal organs. One of the big things you can think of with the skeletal system protecting internal organs is the cranium or your skull. Inside of that cranium is your brain. Brain's very delicate. It is entirely encased in bone and protected by it. Another thing to think about is your vertebral column, all your individual vertebrae that form your backbone. Inside of that is a very easily injured tender nerve that needs much protection. And that major nerve, your spinal cord, is protected by the vertebral column. Another thing to think about is your rib cage and your sternum. Together they form a cage around your heart and lungs and protect them. So it protects major internal organs. Skeletal system also provides you for movement because your muscles are attached to the skeleton. Without the skeleton, your muscles could pull, but they would simply move themselves instead of moving something. Muscles, when they move something, they pull. They can't push. And so they pull. And if you're going to pull something, imagine yourself standing on ice and you tried to pull a heavy object. Well, maybe instead of the object moving, you would just slide toward the object because you had no anchor. The skeletal system is kind of like that. Muscles are anchored or attached to bones, and when the muscle contracts, the bone doesn't move, so the muscle can pull whatever it's trying to pull with that solid anchor. Next thing, stores mineral reserves and fats. Very important function here. The big mineral you can think about the skeletal system storing, of course, is calcium. And the last one, provides a site for blood cell formation. Your blood is made inside of bone marrow, which is located inside of bones. So those are the major functions. So now let's turn our attention to two major ways that we can classify the skeletal system. There are 206 bones in the human body. We've talked about some of those. We colored them and gave some of them names that we're going to learn. I'm not going to learn all 206, but there are two major parts of the skeletal system. The first is called the axial skeleton. It's made of your skull or your cranium, your vertebral column, all those individual vertebrae that make up your backbone, and your rib cage, all the ribs of your rib cage, and the sternum, which is this flat bone that the ribs attach to right at the midline, right at the medial line of your body. So that's the axial skeleton. The appendicular skeleton, on the other hand, are bones of your arms and of your legs, of your hands and your feet, and your shoulders and your pelvis or your hips. So let's take a look at those in picture form. The axial skeleton, you'll see here in green, you notice it's like the center of the body. It's the head and then the torso parts of your body, except for the pelvis and your shoulders, of course. And then you're going to see in tan the appendicular, the shoulders, the arms, the hands, the ankles, the feet. the legs, the pelvis are all part of the appendicular skeleton. And looking at these, the question is, which would you guess has more bones in it of those 206 bones, the axial or the appendicular? And the answer is it's the appendicular. And the reason why is the bones of the hands and the wrist, tons and tons of bones there, and bones of the feet and the ankles, lots of bones there. So those two areas really add up to a lot of bones. So those are the two major areas, appendicular and axial. Now, last thing, how can we classify bones or put them into categories? One way we can do it, there are other ways, but one way that we're going to talk about today is according to their shape. And there are four major shapes of bones that you see here on the screen. Long bones, such as your humerus in your upper arm, or your femur in your lower leg, upper leg, excuse me, or any of the bones really of the legs, of the feet and the toes and the hands and the fingers are called long bones because just the way they look, they are longer than they are wide. So we call them long bones. Second major category are short bones, include bones of the carpals, which are the wrist bones, and the tarsals, the ankle bones, and also here the patella, the knee bone, the kneecap. These bones are called short bones because, well, they're short. They're mostly cubical shaped, not exactly a square, but or even not exactly round, but they're small cubical shaped bones. Third major category, flat bones. Flat bones are, just as they sound, they're flat, they're wider than they are thick. And some of the bones that are called flat bones are the different bones of the cranium, such as the parietal or the frontal. The sternum is a flat bone. And the clavicle here, even though it's longer than it is wide, is usually classified as a flat bone because if you look at it, it is flat. Even though it's long, it's flat. It's not more rounded the way long bones are. The fourth major category, irregularly shaped bones. And these are just the way they sound. They don't have a certain shape about them that we can put in any of those other categories. And the big ones here that you can see are the pelvis or the hips, and then the individual vertebrae of the vertebral column. And here they're showing you one vertebrae that they've pulled out. So what we've talked about today, we've talked about some introduction of the parts, major parts of the skeletal system. We've talked about the functions of the skeletal system, the two major categories that the skeletal system can be grouped into, axial and appendicular, and how we can classify bones according to their shape. And that's all for today, and we will talk more next time.